let me introduce the topic for our session today, session plenary 2, by a story. So this is a story of a senior leader and a younger leader in a new landscape. Okay, first of all, this is a true story. It's not a telenovela or K-pop. This is really a true story. And what happened, if we can show the slide, when the United States was being established as a new nation, then President Thomas Jefferson called his personal secretary, the name was Meriwether Lewis, and said, I would like you to explore the western part of the United States because I'd like you to discover what else we can have and how else we can. And this is Meriwether Lewis, and called on, he was 80 years old at that time, he called on a younger leader who was about 32 years old. His name was William Clark. Let's go to the next slide and show you the assignment that was given to them by then President Thomas Jefferson. Let's go and show them the map of how big it was. So they were going to start from the eastern part of the United States, take lots of boats with them, a lot of money, a lot of soldiers, and then Meriwether Lewis, captain, invited a younger leader, his name was William Clark, to help him navigate. Now, William Clark had his own competencies, and look, where were they going? They were going to navigate through canoes and boats. But wait, after 1 year of traveling from the east going to the west, they hit something bad. Of course, they had so much money, they had so many soldiers, but they came upon the Rocky Mountains. Not one, not two, but whole mountain range. Okay, tell me, if you had all of your plans and strategies using only the riverway, just like Pastor Hanok was saying about the rivers of life, how can you bring your canoe and use it to go across the mountains? So let's go to the next slide. If you were facing the same challenge, what would you do? A, will you pack up and go home? Because you cannot use your boats anymore. You're going to the Rocky Mountains, and it's so high and so huge. Second, would you just try harder? Using the same plan and strategy, which was going through the waterways. But remember, these were rocky mountains that they had to pass through. Or third, what would you do? Would you see with new eyes? Would you explore new ways? And would you strengthen your leadership team? Today in this session, we are privileged to have 6 speakers, and they will speak in pairs. An intergenerational conversation of a senior leader and a younger leader responding to the message of a senior leader. Let's lean in. I'd like you to lean in and listen. How can we look at the new landscape of mission with new eyes? How can we find new ways together, and how can we raise new leaders? Let me call on our first set, our speakers. Reverend James Tanabe is the senior pastor and professor at Emmanuel Bible College in Japan. He has a lot of experience in Kenya. And after him is Valerie Fifi, our executive director for Heart of God Church. Can you give them a hand, please? And they will be speaking about new eyes. Pastor James, and after that, Valerie will speak.
My name is James Tanabe. The theme given to this pair is the kingdom work in the new landscape, in the new eyes. So let me read the Gospel, Matthew, chapter 9, verse 35. Can you put up the, yes. Verse 35, let me read. Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness. Remember, the theme for us, the pair, is the kingdom work in the new landscape, in the new eyes. So what is the work of the kingdom? What is the work of the kingdom? Let's see what Jesus did, summarized in 3 words: teaching, preaching, and healing. Very simple. Teaching, preaching, and healing. These are, I believe, the main work of the kingdom Jesus did on this earth. And of course, we do the same. We are doing the same continuously. We do the work as Jesus did. Teaching. We teach the truth of God's word. The Bible is the foundation for everything we do, everything we say, and it will never change. And preaching. We preach the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ. The gospel is the message we proclaim. It also will not change. Healing. We bring healing and restoration to the sickness and brokenness of the world. We show God's love and care to people in need. We need to be motivated by love so that we can demonstrate love to people. Love is essential. This also will never change. So we teach, we preach, we love and care continuously for building God's kingdom. That is to fulfill Jesus' new commandment, love one another, and Jesus' great commission, go and make disciples of all nations. How about the new landscape, the new eyes for the kingdom work? What do we have to see? I want to share 3 things that we need to see with our new eyes. First, let me read verse 36. Verse 36. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed, helpless, like sheep without shepherd. It says, Jesus saw the crowds. Harassed, helpless, like sheep without shepherd. We need to see people, to learn, to understand their needs, their pain, and the challenges they are facing. Our new eyes must see and seek the lost as Jesus did. In Japan, many old people are living alone and lonely, just waiting to die. How can we become their friends so that they can come to Christ? Many parents in Japan struggling a lot in raising their kids. And the kids, they are also having difficulties, challenges, because of many weaknesses, mental weaknesses, developmental handicaps, such as ADHD, ASD, and LD. It's becoming very common in Japan that we have to deal with those things. How can we become friends of those families, parents, and children, so that we can teach them in order for them to follow the guidance in the Bible? There are foreigners, almost 3 million living in Japan. They also need to hear the gospel. Some of them, many of them, probably, they can have access to Christianity only when they are in Japan. What can we do? We also need to find out how to become friends of people with, we've been talking about this, LGBTQ+, to show God's love and to preach the gospel. So this is the first thing we need to see. We need to see people to learn and to understand. Please go to the next page. I want to read verse 37. And then I will talk the two more things that we need to see. Verse 37. Then he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field. The second thing our new eyes must see is the harvest that is plentiful and great. The harvest is plentiful. Jesus said, he said and he promised, this must be the new landscape of our churches in Japan as well as in Asia. As you know, Japan is one of the most difficult countries to evangelize in the world. Christian population is still less than 1%. If you go to school, most likely you are the only one Christian in the school. If you work at the company, most likely you are the only one Christian in the company. No one does prayer before meal. When you close to pray before meal, people start wondering, what are you doing? They don't understand. No understanding about Christianity. But the Bible says, Jesus says, the harvest is plentiful. It means the harvest in the future will be plentiful, even in Japan. The great harvest is the only thing that we can expect to happen. The harvest is waiting for us. And finally, the third thing that we need to see, the new landscape, is that Jesus says the workers are few. The workers. This is about the people to join the working team of God's kingdom. Our new eyes must be able to see the younger generations will be added more and more to become the workers for God's harvest field. Not only the harvest will be plentiful in the future, but the number of the young Christian workers will be so many that our churches, our country will be filled with and led by young servant leaders who will be able to teach, preach, love, and care as Jesus did, with the heart of love and compassion like Jesus had. Our work for the kingdom, we will do teaching, preaching, loving, and caring like Jesus did. Our new landscape, we will see like Jesus sees. We have to see the people, the great harvest, and the many more young workers and leaders in the future of our churches in Asia. Thank you very much.
So, I totally agree with everything that Reverend James have just shared about, that the harvest indeed is plentiful and the workers are few. You see, in our church, in Heart of God Church, that's where I'm from, we're a church in Singapore, and we call ourselves a youth church because even after 20 years, the average age of our church is still 23 years old. So in our church, it's really interesting because we get to meet different generations of people, young people, many of them ex-young people are still in our church as well. So you see, one of the things that we talk about in the new landscape, and you probably heard this really often, we say this, that methods must change, but morals and values never change. Methods must change, but morals and values must never change. So what does it mean for us as a youth church? You see, one of the goals in our church is we want to grow younger and stronger. And I'm sure some of you feel this way. Even for me right now, I'm in my mid-30s. When I meet a Gen Z or a Gen Alpha, I feel there is a generation gap. Okay? And I know many parents, they feel that way sometimes, that there is a generation gap. So how do our church keep reaching the next younger generation and the next younger person? You see, we believe that we can be relevant and reverent at the same time. Relevant means keeping up with the modern trends, the society, what they're up to, the latest music, technology, what's going on. That's being relevant. But we can be reverent, fundamental, conservative in our beliefs. You see, in our church, in the youth church, we have mosh pits at the front. We have people jumping, shouting, and screaming during the youth service. Of course, we don't do it for all the services. In the youth service, we have that. But just a few weeks ago, our senior pastor preached in the same service about sexual purity, about keeping sex after marriage. You see, we can be relevant to what the young people want, but we can still keep them fundamental and conservative in the things of God. So you see, one mindset shift that we do in our church is we believe traditionally, for many of us, we expect the young people to first believe in Jesus Christ, then they become a Christian, then we say, you belong to our church. You see, it's very normal. Many of us, we see the young people, we're like, oh, you are supposed to be a Christian. And you must really become holy when you become a Christian. You believe in God, you must behave a certain way. And then finally we say, hey, yeah, you are now a member in our church. But you see, in this new young generation, they believe something totally different. Belonging is the most important thing for them. So we flip it around and we bring belong to the very first step. We make it belong, believe, then become. So you see, and if you think about it, that is exactly how Jesus did it at his time. You see, Matthew the tax collector, Zacchaeus, the women at the well, Jesus was the one that made them feel like they belonged to part of his group. He went up to them, he spoke to them, and eventually, after he got to know them, they became disciples as well. You see, don't get me wrong. You know, when people look at this, they think believing and becoming is not important. I am not saying that. But you know, I'm saying that maybe sometimes, for some of us, we get the sequence a little bit wrong. And you know, sometimes we say that, oh, because you're a Christian, you must behave a certain way. Because you're in church, you must behave a certain way. And if you think about it, that's how many of the young people, you always say, I feel judged. You know, you hear them say, I'm so judged in church. You know, I feel that the Christians, they're so judgmental. But you see, if we just switch the sequence a little bit differently, many of them will feel different about church. You know, it's exactly what Reverend Ashish shared earlier today, that the task force found that the Gen Z said church is judgmental. Why is it so? It's because sometimes as an older generation, we begin to think, hey, you're not behaving the right way in church. So for us, what we try to do is we let the young people feel like they belong. And belonging means we love them for who they are. We help to create an environment where the church feels like a home. So the interesting thing that might shock some of you if you visit us in Singapore is you might see some of our young people walking into the church service and they might be wearing a crop top, showing off their midriff. Some of them, you might see them smoking downstairs at the first floor. Firstly, I must tell you, most of them are not saved, okay? Some of them could be attending our church service for 6 months, 1 year, and they're not even a Christian. But what our church aims to do is we create an environment where they are loved, they feel like they belong, they feel like they have friends that would accept them despite who they are and what they dress or the blue hair that they have on their heads. And because of that, many of the young people, they will continually come back to church. And later on, they slowly believe in God. And that's where we disciple them, we teach them what is it like to behave and become a godly Christian. So what we believe in our church is that an inward transformation will be followed by an outward behavioral change. And that's what we need to shift our mindset about. So one day, if a young person walks up to you in church, they look a little bit different from you. They could be a bit louder than you. They could like a music that has a little bit more expletives in there. If you would just love them, accept them, you know what? I believe many of the young people, they will enjoy the kingdom work as well. They will enjoy the things in church because many of them, they are looking for the truth. They are looking for the things of God as well. So lastly, I just want to share with you, in our church, we find different ways to foster belonging in the different age groups. So one interesting thing that our church has learned is we create events called half-step events. Okay, why is it half-step? You know, we always say when you are a non-Christian, it takes a leap of faith to step into church. But you know what? We want to reduce that for them. So we say before they take that leap to become a Christian, they can take a half step by attending an event that the Christians organize. So we create these events, and I can show you pictures of what we do, and it's across all age groups and demographics in our church. So it could be things like laser tag, burger challenge for the young people, but you know, even for the people who are slightly older, they go hiking, we have university open house. So we have different events that we do to create that half step, so that when the non-Christians come, they realize, hey, these Christians seem pretty normal. These Christians, I can relate to them. I feel a sense of belonging with them. And as they continually feel that way, they will continually come back. And one day, they will also get to know the Lord Jesus Christ. And you know, just like what Reverend James shared right at the start, that this is the way that we feel that we can get the workers in the church. They can feel like they can be involved as well. They can contribute because many of them, they can do different events, they can run different skills to make people and the new friends feel like they belong in the church. So for us, that's how we do it. And in this landscape for our church, that's how we actually create a different way. So coming back, we say traditionally, most of us, we believe that it should be believe, become, belong. But for in the new generation, we believe it should be belong, believe, and become. That's all. Thank you so much.
Wow, that's wonderful. Thank you, Valerie. Thank you, Pastor James. We'll have some time to huddle. You know, I'm sure that as Pastor James and Valerie were speaking, some of you are saying, yeah, right. Good for them. You know, how can you do that? In our church, there's no money. In our church, the people are resistant. I'd like to ask this question to both of them, to Pastor James and to Valerie. When we were having the Zoom meeting to prepare for this, it was interesting that they have different contexts. And yet, the Lord gave them success and favor in their work. My question for you is, for both of you, how would you encourage them, our leaders who are here today, when you experience resistance, when you experience difficulty, when you experience discouragement, how would you speak to them and encourage them to see with new eyes?
I like what Valerie said, that belonging comes first. I think church is very much about belongings. That means love comes maybe before mission. New commandment of Jesus, love one another, was given before Jesus' great commission. Go. We love each other and then we go, or our love is being seen, called, experienced by people so that they feel they want to join us. So the first thing is that we make sure that we love each other. Are we the people that we want to see every week, to have fellowship together, to share many things together in the church? Then when there is love, it could be shared, it could be spread, could be experienced by many people.
Yes, and I really love what Reverend James shared, because some people see our church now, 20 years later, and they think we started that way. You see, for us, we started when my senior pastor, tomorrow you're going to hear her in the morning session, Pastor Leah, we started when she saw 9 young people that didn't look too interested in the adult service, and she pulled them out and loved them, gave them a sense of belonging, like a small group. And because of that, these 9 young people, they started to encounter God. They had a sense of belonging. They started to become like Christians. And honestly, it took a long time. I'm not going to share the full story because tomorrow she's here for herself, so you can ask her. But today, many of these 9 people are leaders in our church 20 years later, still serving God, still believing in the things of God. And so I believe the same thing, that when you have a sense of belonging, you feel like everyone here is my family, they know what I'm going through. You know, as a family, we go through tough times together. We go through the highs and the lows together. You would stick through even when things doesn't seem successful. So yeah, that's what I feel.
Thank you so much. Let's give a hand to Pastor James and Valerie Fifi. You must guess how old Valerie was when she started. How old were you, Valerie?
36.
When you started out in the church?
I came to church at 16.
16. And
Yes.
now she's the Global Executive Director for Partnerships at 36. Thank you again, Valerie. Thank you, Pastor James.